This is our third class on this Maamar, and tonight we will continue the conversation that we had last week about Memmale Kalalman and Sovev Kalalman. When you look at Maamar Chassidus, as they develop from generation to generation, ideas that in earlier Maamarim are harder to understand become a little bit easier to understand. In other words, in the later generations, the Maamarim become more streamlined, which creates a problem. When you learn a Maamar from the Alter Rebbe, in this case, it's a Maamar about Memmale Kalalman and Sovev Kalalman. This same discussion about Memmale Kalalman and Sovev Kalalman exists often in Maamarim of later Rabbeim, very comprehensively, in great detail, and it's developed with all kinds of different explanations and metaphor and so on. And you look back at the Alter Rebbe's version. The question you ask yourself is, did the Alter Rebbe mean this? Or is the Alter Rebbe saying something different? Or said another way, if the Alter Rebbe meant what the later Rabbeim are saying, he would have said what the later Rabbeim are saying. And if he doesn't say that, then perhaps he's saying something different and we're missing something. So I approach tonight's discussion with some hesitancy, with some trepidation. Of course, anytime a person teaches Torah, particularly Chassidus, it's advised that there should be a little bittul, a little sense of insecurity. The Mittel Rebbe said that as man geht sagen Chassidus, when a Rebbe goes to say Chassidus, which is of course quite different than giving a shir in Chassidus, but nevertheless, as man geht sagen Chassidus, darf man sein zerbrochen, als eine was geht in Gas und Kinder werfen vom Steiner. The Mittel Rebbe said that when a Rebbe goes to say a Maamar Chassidus, he has to be so broken in himself, so humble within himself, as if he's walking in the street and children are throwing pebbles at him. And there's a story with the previous Rebbe, with the Rebbe Rayatz, the Friedrich Rebbe, that in the early years of his Nesias, the Maamarim were very long. They would later become shorter, but in the early years they were incredibly long. I understand they said Maamarim as long as 3 and 4 hours a Maamar. Incredibly elaborate, very, very thoroughly explained, and in great detail. Anyway, he said once a Maamar, and it was extraordinarily good, organized, orderly, thorough, understood, and so on. And he spoke for a very long time, for several hours. And then suddenly he stopped, he got up and he walked out. He didn't finish the Maamar. And the Maamar never came out b'ksav, he never wrote it. So the Chassidim came to the Rebbe Rayatz, the Friedrich Rebbe, this is the first years of his Nesias, and said, what happened to the Maamar? So the Rebbe said that he has a Kabbalah, which means a tradition that when you say a Maamar, there has to be some kind of inexactitude. There's got to be something about the Maamar where there's a certain bump in the road or a certain frustration. He says, if it goes too smooth, it's not correct. And he said, I said this Maamar, it was so smooth, it was so perfect, I knew I needed to stop. So he stopped in the middle of the Maamar and didn't finish it. Now, of course, these are stories about a Rebbe, and as I'm sure you know, a Rebbe doesn't chazer Chassidus, a Rebbe says Chassidus. A Rebbe says Chassidus. In other words, when a Rebbe speaks Chassidus, it's Gili Alakus Memmale in Welt. When we learn Chassidus, we're chazering Chassidus, we're learning Chassidus, we're trying to understand the Giluim that the Rabbeim gave us. Nevertheless, obviously, a person learns Torah, the Torah has to be learned be'emo b'yideh b'reses u'b'zeya, particularly Pnimiyas HaTorah. But as we approach tonight's class about Memmale Kalalman and Sovev Kalalman, I have this hesitancy, or this additional hesitancy, because what is explained in the later Maamarim is so obvious that the fact that the Alter Rebbe didn't say it makes you wonder. Did the Alter Rebbe not say it because the Alter Rebbe was the first, and he's making enough of a revolution in saying the Maamar as we have it, and he, so to speak, left the development of that revolution to the later Rebbes? Or is there another intent, or is there another aspect that we're missing? And obviously the answer to that question is, we don't know. I don't know. Having said that, let me begin the shir as follows. In last week's class, the Alter Rebbe introduced us to Memmale Kalaman and Sovev Kalaman. The official form, the official intent of the Alter Rebbe was to discuss the difference between Chayes HaNefesh and Chayes HaLeki, the difference between the life of a neshama, which goes into a body of a human being or an animal, to give it life, and the life that comes from Hashem, that comes into the world to give the world existence. What he explains in short is that when a neshama comes into a guf, there's tfisa. There's hislapshus and there's tfisa. The neshama is limited to the body, revealed in the body, and grasped by the body. Grasped by the body means that the neshama reacts to the body. When the body hurts, the neshama hurts. When the body rejoices, the neshama rejoices. When the neshama is more revealed, the body grows. There's an interaction, there's an interplay, an interconnectedness, or an interface between neshama and guf. As opposed to Chayes HaLeki, the divine light that comes into the world to create and sustain the worlds, it's Leishanisi, Hashem is affecting the world, but it's Iyu Tafes Bekulu Almin V'leisman the Tafes Bey. He's touching without being touched. He's affecting without affecting. In other words, the world has its existence because of him. But the world does not touch him. He's not affected by the world. Because there is no hislapshus, the godliness which is giving existence and life to the world is not revealed in the world. And because it's not revealed in the world, it's not tfisa, the world has no hold on it. That's the basic model of last week's class. That the neshama's entry into the guf is b'derech hislapshus, that means revealed and tzimtzumed, and tfisa, which means to say the neshama reacts to the body. When it's hot for the body, the neshama is hot as well. And the Chayes HaLeki doesn't have hislapshus. That means to say the godliness of Sovev Kalaman is not revealed, and therefore there's no tfisa, the world, there's no hold on Sovev Kalaman. And as a consequence, we speak about Leishanisi, as I explained to you last week in the beginning of the class, not only about Atzmos, but about Ein Sof as well. What's the problem? The problem is that in last week's Maamar, the Alter Rebbe withdrew from this position. The Alter Rebbe already began to change his mind about this difference. How? Because he said that there's two levels in Chayes HaLeki, there's two levels in the godly light which comes into the world. One which does have hislapshus and does have tfisa, which we call Memmale Kalaman, and another which doesn't have hislapshus and doesn't have tfisa, which we call Sovev Kalaman. In other words, Rabbi say, the Alter Rebbe has a Maamar where he's trying to draw a distinction between how the neshama goes into the guf and how godliness comes into the world, when in reality it's not a distinction between how the neshama comes into the guf and how godliness comes into the world. It's a difference between two different types of light and two different types of life, both in the way the neshama comes into the guf as well as in the way godliness comes into the world. In other words, they're really not different, they're really the same. There's two levels of the neshama's relationship with the guf. One is with tfisa and hislapshus, and the other is without. There's two levels of relationship between Eirech Chayes HaLeki and the world. One is with hislapshus and tfisa, and one is without. And actually, even though the obvious point of the Alter Rebbe is to separate heaven from earth, in reality, to a great extent, earth is actually a metaphor for heaven, is a mashal for heaven, because by understanding the way the neshama comes into the guf, in both aspects, you can understand how the Chayes HaLeki comes into the world in both aspects, because in both domains, in both realities, you have both things. So it's hard to be sure that you're not misunderstanding the Maamar, because the Alter Rebbe's obvious point is precisely the opposite of what seems to develop to a great extent in the Alter Rebbe's own words, and to an even greater extent in the Maamar of the later Rabbi. It stops being a difference between heaven and earth and becomes a difference between Makif and Pnimi, and becomes a difference between Sovev and Memmale. So I am not going to attempt to resolve this dilemma. I have some thoughts on it, but I'm not going to speak them. Certainly not here, now. But instead, I'm going to repeat the ideas that we learned last week. But instead of repeating them in a way that shows the difference, we're going to repeat them in a way that shows the similarity, the commonality, how they're actually the same. And we'll start with the neshama, and then we'll go to godliness. The basic source of the material I'm going to share with you now is Perek Nun Aleph, chapter 51 in Tanya. And of course, like many other ideas in Tanya, which are written, relatively speaking, in brief, you have these concepts in other Maamar Chassidus in incredible detail, with very, very elaborately, very, very, very well explained. A neshama in Gan Eden has no parts. A neshama in Gan Eden is called Koyach Echad Ruchni Pashat. If you would meet a neshama in Gan Eden, it would be the equivalent of a ball, or the equivalent of a point. And this ball would have neither eyes, nor ears, nor a mouth, nor a nose, nor any kind of distinguishing characteristics. It would be nekuda achas, one indivisible and distinguishable point, where you see no difference between one part of it and another part of it. This neshama can see, but it has no eyes. That means to say there isn't a specific part of the neshama that sees, all the neshama sees. This neshama can hear, but there are no ears. That means to say there's no specific part of the neshama that hears, all of the neshama hears. This neshama can reason, but since the neshama doesn't have a brain, there is not an area of the neshama which is distinct for knowledge and for ideas and for creativity and for imagination. But the whole neshama is involved in ideas, and it goes on and on and on and on. In other words, it's one point. Every attribute, every faculty that the neshama possesses, the entire neshama is. One single, indivisible essence of spiritual life. That's the way the neshama is in Gan Eden. What happens to a neshama when the neshama comes down into the guf? In order for the neshama to come down into the guf, the neshama must become divided. It must become diversified. That means to say, in the body there's going to be eyes. The eyes are going to be a house, a garment, a seat for the keach hariyah shebenefesh, for the faculty, for the sense of vision of the neshama. The body has ears, and the ears are going to be the seat and the home and so on for the keach, the chush hashmiya, the keach hashmiya, the sense of the power of being able to hear. Now, if in the neshama, all of the neshama sees, and all of the neshama hears, and all of the neshama reasons, and all of the neshama can smell and taste, and so on and so forth, how do you divide up the neshama? When the neshama comes into the guf, that this part of the neshama goes to this part of the guf, and that part of the neshama goes to the other part of the guf, if there are no parts of the neshama in Gan Eden. So the answer is that the neshama in Gan Eden has parts, but that the division of the parts of the neshama in Gan Eden is overwhelmed by the makifim of the neshama. In other words, a neshama in Gan Eden has levels. And the highest levels of the neshama in Gan Eden are called chaya and yechida. Yechida. The levels of chaya and yechida are infinite, and the levels of chaya and yechida are plain. That means to say, in the yechida shebenefesh there are no parts. In Gan Eden, the levels of chaya and yechida are so predominant, are so much stronger, that the idea that there's lower levels of the neshama, which we were to call nefesh ruach neshama, as opposed to chaya yechida. And on the levels of nefesh, ruach, and neshama, there are divisions. The chaya yechida makif, the light, the power, the intensity of the higher levels of the neshama is so predominant and so overwhelming to the lower levels of the neshama that the lower levels of the neshama cease to be distinct, and they become expressions of the makifim, of the chaya and yechida, and accordingly they cease to be separate. There are no eyes, so you can see with the whole neshama. Even though there's a koyach hariyah, the way the neshama is in Gan Eden, the koyach hariyah is part of the simple infinity of the neshama. There's a keach hashmiya, there's a power to hear, but the way the neshama is in Gan Eden, the keach hashmiya is a part of the infinity and the plainness of the neshama. Therefore, what happens to a neshama when it leaves Gan Eden and it comes down into a guf? Now, obviously, there are many details. And by no means are we going to be talking about all of the details, but just the ones that are relevant to our conversation. When the neshama leaves Gan Eden and comes down into a guf, the first thing that happens is that there's a separation. The makifim, the hidden levels, the infinite levels, the higher levels of the neshama are separated. And separate means they become more concealed. They stop dominating, they stop overwhelming the lower levels of the neshama. And the lower levels of the neshama separate out. When the neshama has to come into the guf, the levels of the neshama that don't fit into the body become hidden out. They become deflected by lack of a home, by lack of a host, by lack of a place where they can manifest into a state of hiddenness. And the lower levels of the neshama, which is neshama that's in the brain, and ruach, which is in the heart, and nefesh, which is in the liver, or the kidneys, they now split up. Instead of being one and plain, they become three. The neshama is in the brain, the ruach is in the heart, and the nefesh is in the kidneys and the liver, and so on. And once they become three, the three becomes many, many more. There's the right side of the brain, which is chokhmah, the left side of the brain, which is bina, the back of the brain, which is das. There's a right eye, a left eye, a right ear, a left ear, a right nostril, a left nostril, a mouth, and tongues, and teeth, and so on and so forth. And of course, in the middle part of the body, you have the heart, and the lungs, and the arms, and the fingers, and so forth, and so on. So the neshama's descent into this world consists of several tzimtzumim, several steps of diminution, of lessening. Number one, there's a basic separation of the makifim and the pnimiyim. The infinity of the neshama, which makes the neshama and Gan Eden one, is hidden out, so that the levels of the neshama that are limited and diverse emerge, which means that they're separating from the infinity of the neshama. In addition, they're separating from one another, so that you have the keich hashmiya separately, the keich ha'iyah separately, the keich ha'seichel separately, and so on. Then each one of these koichos, each one of these senses and faculties and strengths are going to go into a particular limb. The power of seeing is in the eyes, the power of hearing is in the ears, and so on. When the neshama's part descends and manifests, which is called hislapshus and tfisa, in the part of the body which is designed to receive them, there's a further tzimtzum. In other words, in addition to the neshama being reduced into parts where the power to see separately and the power to hear separately, that power of vision, as it is before it comes into the body, sees spiritual things. And once that power of vision begins to see through the physical eye, it sees only physical things. So there's an incredible reduction, incredible tzimtzum from the way the neshama is prior to its slapshus and tfisa and the guf, which means revealed and manifest in the body, and post, after its base slapshus and tfisa, it's revealed and manifest in the body. So you have two or three different tzimtzumim. The removal of the makif and the manifesting of the pnimi, the division of the pnimi into aspects, and the further tzimtzum of the pnimi when it goes into the guf. What's important to understand is that when this neshama leaves Gan Eden, and this neshama divides itself up into parts, and the infinite levels of the neshama become, so to speak, hidden out in as much as the body is concerned, and the finite levels of the neshama make their way into the body, and in so doing they become more and more reduced, there's something you have to understand. And that is, the neshama is a pnimi b'yetzim. The idea that the neshama is a pnimi b'yetzim means that when your neshama comes into your body, even if the percentage of neshama which is in your body is tiny compared to the totality of the neshama, the whole neshama is loyal to your guf. One of the interesting ideas that I found in Chassidishe is that even the neshama is infinite and the body is finite, and the percentage, the capacity of the guf to hold onto neshama is so limited, the entire rest of the neshama, which is not able to be revealed, cannot sustain a second body and a third body and a fourth body. It can't be divided up, because the neshama has a loyalty that goes till Yechida. The pintala of the neshama, which is so hidden because it's infinite and it's plain and it's one, from the neshama melabeshes baguf. But because we're talking about a neshama, and a neshama is a pnimi b'yetz, it means to say it has a loyalty that goes till the very, very essence of its nature, of its being. All of the neshama which is not in the guf is called makif. That means it's hidden in the guf. It's not someplace else. It's not giving life to somebody else. It's not hyperventilating. It's not on vacation. It's not unemployed. It's engaged. It's hidden from the body, but it's indirectly related to the body, because the entire neshama, including the neshama which is not beslapshus, which is not revealed and manifest in the body, is connected to that body. So the whole of the neshama is connected to our guf, even though the percentage of the neshama which is revealed in the guf is very small. And this becomes the mashal from Memmale Kalalman and Sovev Kalalman. Memmale kol almin means the level of the neshama in the mashal, which is revealed in the body in the way that the body is receiving it and appreciating it and feeling it and experiencing it. Sovev kol almin would be those levels of the neshama which are too unlimited for them to be revealed in the body. But even though they're not revealed in the body, they have a relationship with the body. They're not someplace else. They are the makif. They are hidden from this particular guf. So there is also in the mashal of the neshama and the guf two levels, basically. The levels of the neshama which are behislapshus and betfisa, which are revealed and limited and so on, that are the equivalent of Memmale kol almin, where the godliness is affected by the world because they're revealed to the world. And then there's a level of Sovev kol almin, which is above it and hidden from it, not revealed in the body, but indirectly connected to the body. And later on, you'll see that even the mashal of Chaya and Yechida, which is like Sovev kol almin, does have a hashpah, does have an influence on the body, as the Rebbe would say often, ukafi sheyizbaya lekaman. So in short, we talked about the mashal of the neshama, and in talking about the mashal of the neshama, we said that the neshama has the equivalent of Memmale kol almin and Sovev kol almin. Now let's go to the nimshal, the Eibishter, or Eibishter linis to be more precise. The correct terms for Sovev kol almin and Memmale kol almin in this context would be Oyer and Chayes. Oyer means light and Chayes means life. I'm a teacher by profession, as I would imagine you know. And as such, you're always trying to find a language which will reach the Talmidim, that'll cross the divide between Rav and Talmud, that the student should understand what you're trying to say. So you look for cliches, you look for cute ways of saying things that appeal to a student, that it should get him to think. And one of the things I do often with my students and my teenagers is I tell them that when you're learning Kabbalah and Chassidus, and you come across a word or a level or an idea, and you don't know what it means, ask him his last name. And by knowing his last name, you can know what the first name means. For example, if you want to know what the word yesh is, ask him his last name. His last name is Me'ayin. By knowing what Me'ayin is, you can understand yesh. This can be done with many different things. The two words that we are now using to have the conversation about Memmale kol almin and Sovev kol almin are the words Oyer v'Chayes, which of course I found in the famous letter of the Rebbe Rashab, which is printed in the beginning of the Yem Yem, Ve'en kan hamakom laharach b'zeh. What's the difference between light and life? What is the difference between light and life? Oyer and Chayes. The simplest way to answer that question is to ask Oyer, what's your last name? And to ask Chayes, what's her last name? And then you'll know. Oyer's last name is Me'ein Amoyer. The last name of Oyer is I come from God. Chayes, what's her last name? Chayes' last name is Lahachiyes, to give life to something else. Just think about what I said. There is a concept of light that is divine. There's a concept of life that is divine, and they are not only different, they're opposites. In light, the entire emphasis in the phenomena and concept of light is where it's coming from. In life, the entire emphasis and the entire concept of what life is where it is going to the body. So in Oyer, the whole priority is what it reflects. And in Chayes, the whole priority is in what it can do in affecting something other. And on that basis, you could understand the difference between Memmale kol almin and Sovev kol almin. Sovev kol almin is godliness. Memmale kol almin is godliness. But Sovev kol almin is godliness that's in the business of being like God. Memmale kol almin is godliness that's in the business of providing life to a world. And accordingly, Memmale kol almin and Sovev kol almin are as different as they are. So let's talk about the mashal. What do we know about light? Light is a reflection of the source. How do we understand the metaphor of light being a reflection of the source? So in brief, light has every color inside of itself. White light has every wavelength of the spectrum, right? Going from red on one end to blue on the other end, and of course there's the red that we cannot see, which is very long wavelengths, and the blue which we cannot see, which is very short wavelengths, but every wavelength, every spectra of light exists in white light. But as every color of light exists in white light, it's not separated, it's not parts. It's one. Just like in the mashal of the neshama in Gan Eden. There's as many parts, and they're one because of the Eid Ha'el al Kulana, because of the transcendent power of the makifim of the neshama. Similarly, in Eid Ein Sof, there may be the possibility for every sfira, for every color, but in as much as they exist in Eid Ein Sof, they're one, like white light has within itself colors. In order to extract from light color, you have to do two things according to Chassidus, underlined twice. Number one, you have to remove the makif of the earth. You have to remove the level of the light, which is the unifying force, which is called in Tanya, Eid Ha'ela Al Kulana, the light which transcends above all. In other words, according to Torah, the different colors in the rainbow are not unified because of what they themselves are, but because there's a higher power that unifies the various different wavelengths. So they should appear as one light. In order to split the white light into the various different colors, number one, you have to remove the makif, the Eid Ha'el al Kulana. Number two, once you remove the makif, the pnimi can divide itself up into different colors. And as you all understand, if you have light going into a variety of different screens, the red is the only color that doesn't go through a red screen, so you see red reflected. The blue is the only color which does not go through a blue screen, which is what you see reflected, and so forth and so on. So there's two symptoms. The first symptom is the unity, the white, the makif has to be removed. And the second is the various different colors have to be divided up and to go into the very different vessels that represent those colors. And here again, you have a mashal for Sovev Kalaman and Memmale Kalaman. Sovev Kalaman means godly light that's giving energy to the world, that reflects God. Godly light that gives energy and life and light to the world, that reflects God, the world cannot perceive. Why not? It's infinite and plain. And the world is finite and complex. So the Eibish's light touches the world and affects the world, but there's no islapshus and there's no tfisa. It's not revealed, it's not grasped. Memmale Kalaman means how that light, through a series of tzimtzumim, is divided, and the makif is removed, and the pnimi is mischalik, and then it's mislabish and tfisa. This is a level of godliness which is limited to the world. It's revealed to the world feels that light, and conversely, when something happens in the world, Memmale Kalaman feels it. When somebody gets hurt, the lakus feels it on the level of Memmale Kalaman. So this is the mashal and the nimshal from Memmale and Sovev. In other words, notwithstanding that in last week's class, it seemed to us that the Alter Rebbe is drawing a distinction between Chayes Eliki and Chayes HaNefesh. But as the Maamar progressed, and certainly as you learned in Maamar of Liadi Rabbi, you discover it's not one or the other, it's that each one of them has two levels. In the Neshama, there's a level of Makif and a level of Pnimi, and in Elikus, there's a level of Sovev and a level of Memmale. This is a review and a clarification, and perhaps some additional insight into the class that I gave you last week. Having done that, I would like to spend the entire class talking over Memmale Kalaman and Sovev Kalaman as these ideas are found in Maamar Chassidus. What I want to say now is this. This is, again, as a teacher, I'm always looking for form to get my children, my students to pay attention. And this is one of the things that I tell my students when we have the conversation about Memmale Kalaman and Sovev Kalaman. I would ask my students, what is the last name of the word Gilui? Gilui means revelation. What is Gilui's last name? Or to be more edel about it, what is Ha'ara's last name as opposed to Oyer? And of course the answer to the question is, Gilui's last name is El Azula's. Revealed means to somebody else. There's no such thing as revelation to yourself. Revelation is only to another. So if there's a revelation, revelation assumes El Azula's. What is the opposite of Gilui? The opposite of Gilui is Etzem. What does etzem mean? So you've heard me talk about this many times, because this is something which is always in my throat. The meaning of the word etzem is not essence, because the meaning of the word essence we don't know either. It's not helpful. The meaning of the word etzem means anything that exists in relationship with itself. In other words, etzem and gili are opposites. Gili means el azulas, and etzem means el atzmai. Gili means for somebody else, etzem means for myself, and what's for myself and what's for somebody else are fundamentally different. They're opposites. For myself is the whole truth, but in a concealed and a hidden way. And for somebody else, there is a partial truth that's being delivered through a series of tzimtzumim that should reach there. That's the difference between Gili and Etzem. Like you have in V'yadaita Moskva, in Reish Nun Zayin, and you also have it in Hemshech Tzadik Dalet. It's called the Klal Gadol. It's a great principle in Chassidus and Kabbalah. You do not have too many Klal Gadols. In Chassidus, you have in Tanya, you have a few of them, Perek Tezayin, but B'chlal, there's not that many things which are categorized as great principles, Klal Gadol. And you have in these Maimorim a very interesting Klal Gadol. Klal Gadol means an important philosophical principle. And the principle says as follows: Kol Gilu Ha'etzem, Hu Helam Lagabe Azulas, V'Kol Gilu Azulas, Kol Gilu La'azulas Hu Helam Ha'atzmi, Helam Lagabe Ha'etzem. That means to say, if I am revealing to you all of me, you're going to get nothing. And if I am revealing to you something that you could get, it isn't all of me. If I'm giving you etzem, you're getting nothing. And if what I'm giving you, you're getting, it's not etzem. And the logic is simple. You cannot communicate infinity. Each one of us is an infinity. Maybe not an infinity of logic, but an infinity of presence, of life. Nobody can share with somebody else their infinity. You can talk about yourself, you can talk about your ideas, you can talk about your feelings, you can talk about your attitudes, you can talk about your priorities and your philosophies and your experiences. Nobody can communicate to another person, if you will, why they love themselves, their own infinity. If a person succeeds in communicating to somebody else what they are, it's not the whole truth, it's a partial truth. So the Rebbe Rashab says very plainly, if it's Gili Ha'etzem, if you're communicating all of you to another, it's hell Magabe Azulas, they don't get any of it. If it's a Gil Lagabe Azulas, if what you're saying to that other person about yourself reaches them, it's Helam Ha'atzmi, it can't be the whole truth. And these are the two words that I would like to put onto our plate right now, the word Gilu and the word Etzem. And I would like to discuss each one of them separately. What are the definition of the word revealed? And what is the definition of the idea of something that exists in an essence state and a non-revealed state? So I have three rules that govern each. Revelation has three rules, and essence, non-revelation, has three rules. The three rules of revelation are, number one, that it's being revealed to somebody else. You don't reveal it to yourself. Revealing to yourself is crazy. You reveal it to somebody else. Which means, number two, it's only revealed if the other person receives it. If someone teaches the most amazing teaching and the students don't learn, he hasn't revealed anything. Revelation is not determined by the teacher giving, but by the student receiving. Which leads to the third and the most important principle of what revealed means. The third definition of revealed is that the one who chooses how much the teacher can give the student, or how much the revealer can give the revelee, or whatever the particular example is, not the teacher, not the parent, the student, the zulas, the makabel. Since giving to you means you get it, you decide what I can give. A teacher who teaches a student more than the student can receive is not only not giving the student, the more he's actually complicating, he's adulterating, he's confusing what the student would be able to understand. So the three rules of revelation are, it's for somebody else, it's reaching them, and it's always limited. And who determines the limit? Not the teacher, not the mashpia, the student, the makabel, because you can only give what's able to reach their vessels. And this is what we're talking about in the Maamar. The Alter Rebbe, his slapshus has to be revealed in the vessels, and therefore tfisa, the vessel feels the life that's inside of itself, and the life is affected by the vessel which holds it. Those are the three rules of revelation. That's one side of the coin. What's the other side of the coin? The three rules of essence. What's essence? It's not Meshil Azulis. It's not revealed to anybody else. Essence exists, an etzem, which means a being that exists in relationship with itself, it exists only for itself. And since it exists only for itself, it doesn't have to reach anybody else. Nobody can know it. And since it does not have to reach anybody else, it doesn't have to have any limit. It certainly does not have to have a limit which is imposed upon it by something outside of itself. That is really the difference between Memmale Kol Almin and Sovev Kol Almin. Sovev Kol Almin means Hashem is revealing the whole truth. By revealing the whole truth, He's guaranteeing that we don't get it. We're affected by it, it touches us, it's very important, but we don't feel it. Because it's not limited to our capacity to feel. And since we do not feel Sovev Kol Almin is not affected by what we do. On the other hand, Memmale Kol Almin is the life that comes from the Eibishter, which is emphatically limited. Limited means that the body and the world feels that level of godly light and life. And therefore what happens to the light, happens to the body affects the light and the life. And what happens to the light and the life affects the body. That's Memmale Kol Almin and Sovev Kol Almin. And as I started saying in the beginning of the Shir, notwithstanding the Alter Rebbe's form in the Moshel of Neshama, you have Memmale and Sovev, which would be Makifim and Pnimiyim. And Lamaila, you would also have Makifim and Pnimiyim, which is called Sovev Kol Almin and Memmale Kol Almin. Which brings us to the next point. And the next point is, according to the discussion we're now having, the Neshama has a Memmale and a Sovev. Godliness has a Memmale and a Sovev, but there's something more. And the more is, we are affected by the Memmale and the Sovev. The Neshama is affected both by the Makifim and the Pnimiyim. The world is affected both by the Memmale and Sovev. In fact, in some Maamarim it is written that the effect that Sovev Kol Almin has on the world is more important than the effect that Memmale Kol Almin has on the world. And that's the next thing that we need to explore. It isn't that Memmale has a relationship with the world and Sovev doesn't. It isn't that the Pnimi of the Neshama have a relationship with the body and the Makifim don't. No. The Makifim and the Sovev also have a relationship with the body and the world respectively. But that the relationship between the Makifim of the Neshama and the Sovev of Alakus with the world is called Makif. It's called hidden, the body doesn't feel it. And now we get to the famous Meshalim that Chassidus brings in order to explain Memmale Kol Almin and Sovev Kol Almin. And I am going to bring to you what Chassidus says, but I'm going to try my best to explain it to you in my own words, and I hope I don't mislead. I hope I tell it to you correctly, richtig. In a word, the mashal for Sovev Kol Almin is willpower, ratzon. In a word, the mashal for Memmale Kol Almin is koiches, is the different faculties of the neshama. Why? Because will operates by force. Will imposes itself upon you. Will does not have islapshus. When you want something, you don't come to your brain and give explanations. You force the brain to learn b'makom sheli b'chafas. When you don't want to feel a certain emotion, the will tells the heart not to feel and doesn't give the heart therapy to make the heart appreciate why not to feel. He has to listen. He's forced. Will, in every relationship between willpower and the body, the will overpowers the body. That's the concept of willpower. The faculties of the neshama are quite different because they don't overpower the body. They fuse with the body. They become one with the body. They become one with the body in such a way that we say, Chai Neis Yasasim, as if the body itself is the life. So having given you the basic difference, that Sovev Kol Almin is like ratzon, and the Memmale Kol Almin is like koiches, let me give you a few examples. What's the difference between talking and singing? What's the difference between walking and dancing? What's the difference between writing and drawing? And I can go on. Of course, the answer is that a baby is born, he cannot talk. But once a child learns to talk, talking is done without any concentration. One of the greatest gifts that humanity have is not only that we speak, but we don't even speak out the words. They tumble out of us by themselves. A person is not born knowing how to write, but once he knows how to write, he doesn't pay attention to how the letters look. He pays attention to his ideas. The letters come off the pen without any attention. Once a person has learned to walk, They have to pay no attention. A healthy person should not be paying attention to their walking. The halacha is that the difference between a person and an animal is that a Baal Chai looks where he walks and therefore he won't fall into a pit, and a human being is not paying attention. He walks. That's a din in Likutei Torah. On the other hand, to sing, to draw, and to dance, you can never do without concentration. Never. If you're singing the same piece for the 1,000th time, or you're playing the same piece for the 1,000th time, or you're dancing the same dance, or you're drawing the same image, after many, many times, each time you do the act, you have to concentrate again. Why? Not because it's hard, not because you don't know how to do it, not because you aren't trained, but because each time you engage in this activity, you have to bring your neshama into your mouth, into your hand, and into your leg. If you don't bring your neshama down into your mouth, and into your hand, and into a leg, a person listening to you, or watching you, or reading you, and whatever the case is, will sense a superficiality. He will feel like he's cheated, like you're not giving him neshama. Because when you sing, you're not just saying words, you're revealing neshama, and the neshama has to be invested each time separately. When you dance, if the dance is the proper dance, it's with the right beat and the right moves, and of course it's saying something sensual, something pneumistic, something more than simply movements of the body, you must concentrate, because that concentration is not only helping you dance, the concentration is revealing the neshama in the guf, which is the pneumius of the dance. And the same is true in art, and the same is true in music, and the same is true in dance. So two people, one is writing and the other is drawing. One is walking, the other is dancing. One is singing and the other is talking. What's the difference? The difference is both of them are using the powers in the body. One is using the power of the mouth to sing or to speak. Another is using the power of the hand to draw or to write. The other is using the power of the legs to dance or to walk. But there's a big difference. And the difference is the person who is walking, talking, and writing isn't concentrating. The willpower, the makif, has taken over the guf, and it's taken over the guf in such a way that the body does things reflexively. A person who has to concentrate on writing or walking is not well. A healthy person does these things spontaneously because the will overpowers the body and unifies the body and makes the body do as the will wishes without paying any attention whatsoever. It's a passive kind of a thing. In other words, those things that the Eibush designed for us to do naturally, at a certain point we do them from reflex. When you write, you write. When you talk, you talk. When you walk, you walk. The concentration is not on walking, it's where you need to go. The concentration is not on writing, but what you're writing, and so forth and so on. While when a person is singing, or dancing, or drawing, they have to bring the neshama down each time, because what they're doing is not only something that requires more skill, it's something that requires more neshama, more pnimius, more chush. And each time you do it, even after thousands of times, you have to reinvest the same concentration, or it doesn't happen. This is a mashal. Where the first set, that means walking, talking, writing, are connected to ratzon, to will. Even though when you're writing, there's neshama in your hand. But the neshama in your hand is not revealed in the hand. The willpower is making the neshama in the hand right. But the emphasis on the word will, and the same is true when you're walking, and the same is true when you're speaking. But when you're dancing and singing and drawing, the willpower can't do that, because willpower will destroy the preciseness. This requires concentration. The willpower is in the background, and instead you're using the koiches pnimiyim to bring it down from the neshama to the guf, that it should be beautiful, it should be proper, it should be ideal, it should be correct, and so forth and so on. This is the difference in ratzon and koiches. I'm going to tell you a cute story. 35 years ago, literally 35 years ago, we were 15-year-old kids, 14-year-old kids. A whole group of us went from California, from Likutei, from Crown Heights, from Brooklyn to Erechon Chabad. It was the summer of Tafshin Lametes of 1979. It was the very beginning of that yeshiva, and many of us stayed. We were the first Talmidim of that yeshiva. Anyway, that summer they took us on a lot of trips. They really made it worthwhile. And of course, one of the places we visited was Disneyland. And in those days, when you went to Disneyland, they didn't give today a pass on your wrist. You got tickets. And you had to use the tickets. It was the whole chokhmah of Disneyland is you should use up all your tickets to maximize the amount of money you spent on that trip. And you got 1 A and 2 Bs and 3 Cs and 4 Ds and 5 Es. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're younger than me and haven't been to California. The A ticket is the cheapest ticket. And it was used for a very simple ride or attraction. One of the options that you could use your A ticket for was they had a theater that you would walk into a room and sit down, and Abraham Lincoln would get up and make the Gettysburg Address. Walt Disney was all about animation. He made a machine, perform a task of a person with so much detail that it looked like the real thing. Abraham Lincoln was not an actor. It was a machine, would get out of his seat and make the entire Gettysburg Address and sit back down. And it was brilliantly done. This Mr. Lincoln would stand up, he would nod, he would turn his head, he would wave his hands, he would even blink. A machine. So a whole bunch of us walked into this theater, and we had one interest. We were interested in the Gettysburg Address. We had to find the machine. We had to show where the machine was not like a person. And it was very, very impressive, because this machine was calculated to do everything a human being would do. In other words, if you would figure out how many different nuances in motion there are in the body and in the arms and in the legs and the facial expressions in a human being, the machine was designed to do all of that. And it was not bad. It was pretty impressive. But how long can you fool a yeshiva bacher? We found the weakness in the machine. And it made perfect sense. What was the weakness in the machine? This Mr. Lincoln, this machine, would raise his hand. And he raised his hand as a normal person would. Now what happens after you raise your hand? You lower your hand. How do you lower your hand? You drop it. If Mr. Lincoln had dropped his hand, it would have fallen off. His hand went down the same way it went up. And this was the weakness in Abraham Lincoln that we visited on Main Street in Disneyland in the summer of Tavshin Lamed Tes. I'm not just telling the story to be cute. I'm telling the story to make a point. The energy that's involved in the things that human beings do without paying attention is very different than the energy that human beings do with the things that they're paying attention to. What's a bigger deal, to raise your hand or to drop it? Obviously, raising your hand is a big deal. It's an act. It's intentional. When you're dropping your hand, you're simply not raising it anymore. But who thinks about the fact that when you drop your hand, the amount of force that there is and the gravity in your hand, that when you drop it, it should hurt? How come it doesn't hurt? Because the body has the ability to do things without doing them. The body has the ability to allow things to happen to itself without the body paying any attention. That's what happens when you walk. That's what happens when you converse. There are the things that you're doing and the things that are byproduct of what you're doing that are connected to your reflex. They're connected to the basic part of your nefesh that's what we would call the hard drive of what you are, that you're not concentrating on it. And Chassidus tells you that those parts of you are coming from the highest levels of your neshama. The level of the neshama that allows a human being to drop his hand without thinking about it, and it shouldn't fall off, is ratzon, is Sovev kalam. The level of the neshama that allows a person to raise his hand with focus and with concentration and with purpose is Memmale kalam. A machine you can condition to perform all tasks of Memmale kalam. A machine can never be conditioned to do a task of Sovev kalam, because the task of Sovev kalam means to be alive. And machines are not alive, they're machines. Anyway, you'll either like my mashal or you don't like my mashal. But the mashal of koiches and ratzon is all over Chassidus, it's in Ayin Beis and so on. And this is the difference between Memmale kalam and Sovev kalam. Memmale kalam means Hashem puts life and light into His world in such a way that it, so to speak, requires concentration. The meeting between the Ruach and the Geshem, between the Neshama and the Guf, is so precise and so measured that the body feels the Neshama as if the body itself is alive. The The guf is living. And the same is true in the world. The life of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is invested in the world, that makes the world diverse and detailed and beautiful and orderly and precise and exact, is life, which is all of those things. And it reveals itself in the various facets of the world, whether it's in human beings, animals, plants, and minerals. B'derech hislapshus, let me say it's revealed in that part of the world, that creation, to the degree that revelation can take place between ruchnius and gashmius. And it is also limited. But then there's Sovev Kalaman. Sovev Kalaman is the energy or the life which makes us into one unit. It's the energy into life that provides for reflex, for us to do things without paying any attention. And it's coming from the highest levels of the neshama. And you have Sovev Kalaman in creation as well. So this is the mashal. Ad kan ha-mashal. Memmale Kalaman is like koiches, Sovev Kalaman is like ratzon. The nimshal is, Memmale Kalaman is gilui, and Sovev Kalaman is hel. What's the next piece of this discourse? What should we now move on to? In other words, what should be the last aspect of this entire conversation? The last aspect of this entire conversation is as follows. What does Memmale Kalaman provide, and what does Sovev Kalaman provide? And the answer is, Memmale Kalaman provides chayis, and Sovev Kalaman provides kiyum, or havoya. In other words, Sovev Kalaman is responsible for yesh me'ayin, and Memmale Kalaman is responsible for yesh me'yesh. When your neshama goes into your body, and it gives the body life in such a way that the neshama and the body fuse and they become one, there's one thing you're forgetting. The body already exists. How did the body get here? The body cannot be created by the neshama. Because according to Chassidus, and this is mentioned in Tanya Negerz, Kedishim and Chaf, and in so many places, and we've talked about it before, to create a physical thing from a spiritual thing is called yesh me'ayin. Yesh me'ayin doesn't mean something from nothing, because it's not from nothing, it's from a spiritual thing. It means yesh me'ayin, something from a non-thing. In other words, where a yesh, an independent being, is being produced, that is quantum separated, that is fundamentally separated from its source. Where you look at the physical and you see no link between the physical and the spiritual. Because if you were to see links between the physical and the physical would not be physical. The physical would be spiritual. So yesh means a physical being which exists by the design and the act of God in a way of independence. But this physically independent being which the Eibishter created comes from ayin, from godliness. But the ayin, the godliness which is created, this yesh, is hidden from the yesh. In other words, Sovev Kalaman creates the world. But Sovev Kalaman cannot be revealed in the world. Because if Sovev Kalaman be revealed in the world would cease to be. Memmale Kalaman comes to an existing world and gives it life. If Memmale Kalaman goes away, the world doesn't disappear, it just dies. When Memmale Kalaman goes into the body of a physical thing on this earth, it gives it life and warmth and animation. When that Memmale life will later depart, that body will not disappear, it'll just change forms. But if the Sovev Kalaman, which creates the actual reality of the physical thing, were to stop, were to separate from the body it's giving existence to, it would simply disappear. Which leads to a fantastic irony, a fantastic paradox. When you think about Memmale Kalaman and Sovev Kalaman is infinite, but hidden. Sovev Kalaman is infinite and it operates with force. Memmale Kalaman is finite, but it's revealed. Memmale Kalaman is finite and it operates with an intimacy, with a warmth, with a friendliness even. Memmale Kalaman meets the guf in a way that the guf is very comfortable with the life which is going into it. Here's the irony. Where is there greater dependency? Where is the greater closeness between the physical world and the light of Sovev Kalaman which creates it, or the physical world or the life of Memmale Kalaman which animates it? And of course the correct answer to the question is that the light of Sovev Kalaman is far more connected to the physical world that it creates than the life of Memmale Kalaman is connected to the physical things that it animates. If Hashem would stop investing the ayin and the yesh would disappear. If Hashem would stop investing the chayis into the world would die but not disappear. The world would change but not disappear. In other words, yesh me'ayin is farther and closer from the thing it gives life to. And ila v'yolol, yesh me'yesh, is closer but farther than the thing it gives life to. In other words, in yesh me'ayin, the whole design is, you look at the physical thing, you don't see godliness. But at the same time, that godliness, which is called ayin, which is giving existence to this yesh in a hidden way, in a quantum separated way, has to renew it. B'chol rega v'rega. Every instant has to happen again. And if the ayin would stop creating the yesh would simply disappear. Chayis, life, is revealed. You look at the guf, you see the neshama. You look at an animal, you see he's alive. But the dependency of the life of the body on that living force is such that if the living force would cease to animate, to give life, it wouldn't disappear, it would die, but it would continue existing. So here's the point. Sovev Kalaman is farther from the world than Memmale Kalaman is, and yet Sovev Kalaman is far more responsible for the reality of the world than Memmale Kalaman is. Because Sovev Kalaman may be hidden from the world, but it's actually the source of creation. Because only an infinite force can create a being that should be infinitely separated from its source. And in order for this infinite force to create a being that should be infinitely separated from its source, he must be infinitely invested. B'chol rega v'rega, every instant. Memmale Kalaman is not infinitely separate from its body that it gives life to. And therefore, in the Memmale Kalaman, the body reveals some of the life of the neshama. But in the Memmale Kalaman, the life is not the do or die for the body to which it's giving life. This is tonight's class. So to summarize, we started off by repeating last week's class and pointing out that even though the Alter Rebbe drew a distinction between Chayes and Nefesh and Elikus, arguably in both Chayes and Nefesh and in Elikus, you have both levels of Makif and Pnimi, Sovev and Memmale. We then discussed the three rules of revelation and the three rules of essence, that Memmale Kalaman is revelation and Sovev Kalaman is etzem. We then discussed the mashal of Keches and Nefesh and Ratzon, where the faculties are transforming the body while will is overpowering the body. And lastly, we talked about the fact that from Sovev Kalaman you have yesh me'ayin, if Memmale Kalaman you have yesh me'yesh. And with Hashem's help, next week we'll actually learn some more. Maamar.